Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here to tackle those big ideas you want to get your head around, but without needing a textbook and a week off.
Exactly. Fast, deep knowledge. That's the aim.
And today we are diving into something called Nash equilibrium. Sounds a bit academic, maybe.
It can, yeah. But trust us, it shows up in, well, all sorts of places. We've looked at the original work, John Nash's stuff, obviously.
Right.
And also how it's used now. Think auctions, even traffic jams. It's pretty fascinating.
Okay, so the goal is to unpack Nash equilibrium, see where it came from and why it actually matters, not just theory.
Precisely. Give you the core concepts and, some surprising real-world connections.
Great. Let's start with the person then, John Nash. Huge figure in math, way beyond just this, right?
Absolutely. I mean, geometry, differential equations, really fundamental work. He even got the Abel Prize late in life, which is, massive in mathematics.
But for today, we're zoning in on the game theory side. Specifically, Nash equilibrium. That 1951 paper, Non-Cooperative Games, that's the big one.
That's the cornerstone, yeah. Published in the Annals of Mathematics. Really set the stage.
But, was he the very first person to think about this kind of stable point in competition?
Well, not entirely out of the blue. There was this French economist, Cournot, Antoine-Augustin Cournot, way back in 1838.
1838, wow.
Yeah, he was looked at a specific situation, a duopoly, just two companies selling like spring water.
Okay.
And he figured out that how much one company decides to produce kind of depends on what they expect the other company to produce.
Mm-hmm.
And he saw that this could lead to a stable outcome, where neither wants to change their output.
So Cournot had a piece of the puzzle focused on that specific market thing.
Exactly, he saw it in that context. What Nash did, and this was the breakthrough, was to generalize it. He showed mathematically that this kind of equilibrium exists in, well, any finite game.
Any game with a limited set of players and strategies?
Right. His work proved it was a much, much broader phenomenon than just Cournot's spring water companies.
Okay, so let's nail down the definition then. Nash equilibrium. What is it like in plain English?
Simplest way to put it, it's a state in a game where no player can do better for themselves just by changing their own strategy, assuming everyone else keeps doing what they're doing.
Ah, okay. So everyone's picked their best response, given the choices of others.
That's it. No one has a reason to switch things up on their own. It's stable.
And strategy here, does that just mean like always making the same move?
That's one type, yeah. We call those pure strategies, like always playing rock in rock, paper, scissors. Though probably not a winning strategy there.
Probably not. But you mentioned Nash also dealt with something else, mixed strategies.
Ah, yes, mixed strategies. That's where it gets a bit more subtle.
So instead of always doing X, you might do X sometimes and Y other times, like randomly.
Exactly. You choose between your available actions based on certain probabilities. It's not just a fixed plan.
Okay, was that completely new with Nash?
It's not entirely. Von Neumann and Morgenstern, in their huge 1944 book, The Theory of Games and Economic Behavior.
Right, heard of that one.
They had already looked at mixed strategies, but mainly for what they called zero-sum games.
Zero sum, where one person's gain is exactly another person's loss. Like poker, maybe?
Precisely. My win is your loss, dollar for dollar. They prove that in any finite zero-sum game, there's always an equilibrium involving these mixed probabilistic strategies.
So they cracked it for those win-lose scenarios. What did Nash add?
Nash realized this idea worked far beyond just zero-sum games. His big contribution was proving that any finite game, whether it's zero-sum, positive-sum, whatever, has at least one Nash equilibrium, possibly involving mixed strategies.
Wow, so it's a universal thing for these kinds of games.
Universal, yeah. His definition for mixed strategies is basically that your random mix maximizes your expected payoff, given the random mixes everyone else is using.
Expected payoff. Like your average win over the long run based on the odds.
You got it. And proving this always exists, well, that took some serious mathematical tools. He used something called the Kakutani fixed point theorem in one paper, Brouwer's fixed point theorem in the 1951 paper.
Okay, deep math. We don't need the formulas, but basically these theorems guaranteed that such a stable point, pure or mixed, must exist.
That's the gist. They provide the logical foundation ensuring there's always at least one Nash equilibrium point.
Right. So we have this idea. Stable point, no incentive to change unilaterally, can be pure or mixed strategies. Let's make it concrete. Examples.
Absolutely. A classic one to start with, especially for cooperation, is the stag hunt.
Stag hunt, okay.
Imagine two hunters. They can go off alone and try to catch a rabbit. Easy, guaranteed small meal, say 1 unit of food each.
Okay.
Or they can team up to hunt a stag. Much harder, needs both of them. But if they succeed, big payoff, say 4 units total, so 2 each.
But what's the catch?
The catch is, if one decides to hunt the stag, but the other chickens out and goes for a rabbit, the stag hunter fails completely, gets 0. The rabbit hunter gets their 1 unit.
Ah, so there's risk in trying to cooperate. What are the equilibria here?
There are 2, actually. 2 Nash equilibria. One is both hunt the stag. They both get 2 units. Neither wants to switch to hunting rabbits because they get 0. Stable.
Makes sense. The better outcome if they trust each other. What's the other one?
The other is both hunt rabbits. Each gets 1 unit. And again, neither wants to switch unilaterally to hunting stag because they know the other person is hunting rabbits, meaning they'd get 0 if they went for the stag alone.
So both hunting rabbits is also stable, even though it's worse for both than hunting the stag.
Exactly. It highlights that tension, right, between the potential gains of cooperation and the safety of playing it conservatively. Trust is key. It's a simple model, but it speaks volumes about social dilemmas.
Yeah, I can see that. Getting stuck in a less than ideal situation because of risk. Okay, different vibe now. Matching pennies.
Matching pennies. Classic zero-sum game, head-to-head.
How's it work?
2 players. Each secretly chooses heads or tails. Maybe puts a penny under their hand. Then they reveal simultaneously. Player 1 wins if they match. Both heads or both tails. Player 2 wins if they don't match. 1 heads, 1 tails.
So total conflict. One wants same, one wants different. Where's the stability there? Seems like you just keep trying to outguess the other person.
You would. If you play a pure strategy, like always choosing heads, your opponent will immediately figure it out and always choose tails to beat you. There's no stable, pure strategy.
So it must be mixed strategies again.
Bingo. The only Nash equilibrium is for both players to choose heads 50% of the time and tails 50% of the time, completely randomly.
Why 50-50?
Because if you deviate, say, you start playing heads 60% of the time, your opponent can exploit that. They'll notice and start playing tails more often to increase their wins against you. The 50-50 mix makes your opponent indifferent. They can't gain an edge by predicting you. Stability through randomness.
Okay, interesting. Predictability is your enemy in that game. Now back to economics. Corno competition, the spring water guys you mentioned.
All right, the duopoly. 2 firms deciding how much water to pump and sell.
And the price depends on the total amount from both.
Yeah, more water means lower price. Each firm wants to maximize its own profit.
So how does the Nash equilibrium work there?
Each firm has to guess how much the other firm will produce. Based on that guess, they calculate their own profit-maximizing output level.
Okay.
The Corno-Nash equilibrium happens when both firms' guesses about each other are correct, and given that correct guess, neither firm wants to change its own output level.
So firm A produces X, expecting firm B to produce Y. Firm B produces Y, expecting firm A to produce X. And at those levels, X and Y, neither A nor B could make more profit by changing their output alone.
That's precisely it. It's that stable point Corno himself was getting at.
Uh.
Once they're there, assuming the other stays put, neither can improve their own situation.
Got it. Starting to see the pattern across these different examples. Let's broaden out. Where else does this Nash equilibrium idea pop up in the real world? Auctions you mentioned.
Auctions are a huge area, yeah. Game theory and Nash equilibrium specifically is fundamental to understanding auction design and bidding behavior.
So the bidders are the players.
Right. Bidder's the seller sometimes. Their strategies are their bids or maybe their reservation price, the maximum they're willing to pay.
Yeah.
Payoffs are about whether they win and how much surplus value they get, the difference between what they valued it at and what they paid, their expected utility.
Expected utility. So like how much they expect to benefit on average.
Exactly. Taking into account the chance of winning or losing.
How does Nash equilibrium apply to, say, an eBay auction?
Well, think about it. Your best strategy isn't necessarily to just bid your absolute maximum valuation right away.
Yeah.
You might want to bid strategically based on what you think others might bid.
Right.
A Nash equilibrium in an auction is a set of bidding strategies, one for each bidder, such that no single bidder can improve their expected outcome, their chance of winning at a good price, by changing their bidding strategy, given how everyone else is bidding.
Yeah.
It helps predict winning bids, auction revenue, things like that.
Makes sense. Finding that bidding sweet spot. Okay, shifting gears dramatically now. Traffic, you mentioned something called Brace's paradox. Sounds weird.
It is weird and totally counterintuitive. It's a situation where adding capacity to a network, like building a new road, can actually make things worse for everyone using it. Travel times can go up.
Adding a road makes traffic worse. How on earth does that work?
Okay, imagine a simple network. Start point, end point. Maybe 4,000 cars want to get from start to end. Initially, there are 2 routes, Route A and Route B.
Okay.
Let's say the travel time on each route depends on how many cars use it. Maybe with traffic split 2,000, it takes everyone 65 minutes. At this point, no driver can switch routes and get there faster. It's a Nash equilibrium.
65 minutes. Got it. Stable. Now add the new road.
Now, let's say the city builds a new, super fast shortcut, connecting part of Route A to part of Route B. Looks great on paper.
Seems like it should help.
You'd think. But what happens is, drivers, acting rationally in their own self-interest, see this new shortcut. They think, aha, I can save time. So they switch to the route incorporating the shortcut.
Okay.
But as more drivers do this, the shortcut itself might get congested, and it might also change the traffic patterns on the original parts of routes A and B. The paradox is that a new Nash equilibrium can emerge where everyone takes the route with the shortcut, and now the travel time for everyone is, say, 80 minutes.
Wait, so everyone switched to the better route, and now everyone takes longer?
Exactly. And crucially, even at 80 minutes, no single driver can improve their time by switching back to one of the original routes, which might now be even slower because of how traffic is distributed. So the 80-minute commute is the new, stable, but worse equilibrium.
That is wild. It's like individual rationality leads to collective irrationality. Does this actually happen?
Apparently, yes. The sources mention real-world examples. Seoul removed a whole expressway, the Chiangrai Expressway, and traffic flow nearby actually got better.
Removed a road. Traffic improved.
Wow. And similar things observed, maybe temporarily, in Stuttgart, Germany. And even when they closed 42nd Street in New York City for Earth Day, once congestion decreased.
Incredible. Less is more sometimes.
It really highlights how complex these systems are and how equilibrium outcomes aren't always the most efficient overall.
And this paradox isn't just for roads.
No, the principle applies more broadly. Any network where flow is involved and users choose paths based on perceived self-interest. People have studied it in electrical grids. Could adding a power line paradoxically reduce efficiency? Even in, like, biological systems or tiny electron flows.
Okay.
And more recently, it's even showed up in blockchain technology. Like, adding more payment channels in networks like Bitcoin's Lightning Network could, counterintuitively, sometimes lead to higher transaction fees for everyone.
From highways to crypto. That's quite a reach for one core idea. Now, all this talk Nash equilibrium, these examples, falls under non-cooperative game theory, right? What's the essence of that?
Right. Non-cooperative game theory is the study of these strategic interactions where players make decisions independently. The key thing is there are no binding agreements or contracts forcing them to cooperate.
So it's not that cooperation never happens.
No, not at all. It's just that any cooperation has to arise from self-interest or be self-enforcing. It's not imposed from outside. Nash's work really provides the foundation for analyzing these situations.
So it models competition, but also maybe why cooperation can be fragile, like cartels falling apart.
Exactly. You can model why a cartel agreement might be tempting, but also why each individual member might have an incentive to secretly cheat on the agreement to boost their own profits, potentially leading the whole thing to collapse. It's all about the players, their possible actions, their payoffs, the timing, what they know.
Okay. Now, Nash equilibrium is clearly powerful. But is it a perfect predictor of what people actually do? Are there limitations?
Oh, definitely limitations. It makes some strong assumptions, like perfect rationality, that players always perfectly calculate and choose the action that maximizes their payoff.
Which, let's be honest, humans don't always do.
Right. We have emotions, biases, we make mistakes, we might not have all the information. Also, the model itself might not perfectly capture what players really care about. Maybe fairness matters, not just maximizing profit.
Or the game is just too complex to figure out the equilibrium.
Exactly. If it's super complicated, players might just use rules of thumb or simpler strategies. And then there's the assumption about common knowledge of rationality.
Meaning everyone knows that everyone is rational.
And so on, yes. If you doubt that others are rational or you think they doubt you're rational, you might play differently, maybe more cautiously than the pure equilibrium predicts.
So given these gaps, have people tried to refine the idea, build on Nash equilibrium?
Yes, lots of refinements exist. One mentioned in the sources is coalition-proof Nash equilibrium, or CPNE.
Coalition-proof, what's that about?
It tries to tackle the issue of groups. A standard Nash equilibrium only assumes no individual wants to deviate. CPNE asks, could a group of players get together, agree to change their strategies together in a way that benefits all of them, and importantly, is that group agreement itself stable? Meaning, once they've agreed to deviate, would anyone within that group then have an incentive to break the group agreement?
Ah, so it checks if the equilibrium is stable not just against individuals changing their minds, but also against small groups coordinating a change.
Pretty much, yeah. It's a stricter test, looking for equilibria that are robust even when players can form these self-enforcing little packs.
Interesting. Adds another layer of stability. Okay, let's try and wrap this up. If you had to boil down the main takeaways on Nash equilibrium for our listeners.
I'd say. Number one, it's about stability in strategic situations. A point where everyone's doing the best they can, given what everyone else is doing. No regrets, unilaterally speaking.
Okay.
And number two, it's surprising breadth. From simple games to really complex, real-world stuff like auctions, traffic, economics, maybe even biology and tech. It gives us a powerful lens to analyze interaction.
It really does seem to connect a lot of dots.
Yeah.
Okay, a final thought then for everyone listening. Think about some strategic interaction in your own life. Could be anything, a negotiation at work, planning something with friends, even deciding which lane to drive in. Try to see the game there. Who are the players? What are the choices? And is the outcome you typically see? Could it be a Nash equilibrium? Is everyone stuck doing something because no one can individually make things better for themselves by switching?
And maybe ask, is it the best possible outcome? Or could it be a subtle version of Brace's paradox, where everyone acting rationally for themselves leads to a situation that's actually worse for the group?
Something to chew on. Exploring game theory, even just the basics like this, can really change how you see these everyday interactions.
It definitely offers valuable insights.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Nash equilibrium. We'll be back soon with another topic. Until then, keep thinking, keep questioning,